Today we're gonna transfer our images that we made last week onto a clay tile. And in order to do that, so last week we talked about Keith Haring and we drew a Keith Haring inspired tile that represents you. I put my dog, I put art and music because those are three things that represent me. In order to transfer this image onto the clay later, we're gonna use a 6B pencil, and this is really, really dark, and it will help transferring this image. So I'm just gonna go around and trace over my lines. So any words I'm not going to trace over with the 6B pencil because actually the image is going to be reversed when we transfer it onto the clay. So any of these words I'm just going to write right onto the clay when we're ready to do that.
All right, first you're going to take your 8x8 cardboard tile and put it as close to the edge as possible. Then you're going to take your popsicle stick and glide it down the side while holding down the cardboard with your hand. And the popsicle stick is going to act like a knife, so it will slice right through the clay, and you're going to put your extra scraps of clay on the side in case we want to use that later. Then you can smooth out the edges with your finger to make it less sharp.
I'm going to flip over my image and place it onto the clay, and then I'm going to gently rub and massage the paper, and this is going to make the image transfer onto the clay. Now I'm going to peel up the paper, and you will see the image.
Now you're going to decide which parts of your image is going to be raised up and which parts you're going to be scratching. So any parts of the image that you want raised up is called the additive process, and you're going to cut those parts out so you can trace them on a separate piece of clay and then cut them out and add them to your tile. Any parts you want added onto it, I'm going to take a piece of my scrap clay and I'm going to flip over that cutout image and rub it on to transfer the image. Then I'm going to take my needle tool to cut out this image.
That leg's a little small, but that's okay. So here's my doggy. I'm gonna use my fingers just to smooth it out a little bit. And when I'm attaching a new piece of clay to my tile, we are gonna use the scratch and attach method. This is slip. This is kind of like the glue of clay. So whenever you're attaching something to a piece of clay, you're gonna wanna use the slip as the glue, and we're gonna use a fork to scratch little marks on the back of what you're attaching and where you're attaching it. That's why we transferred this image, so you know exactly where to attach it. I'm gonna go in with my fork and I'm gonna make little marks where that dog image is on my tile. And then I'm gonna scratch the back of my dog. If you don't do this, then when the clay is drying, it's just gonna lift up and break apart. So it's really important for you to scratch both the piece that you're attaching to the tile and where you're attaching it. After you do that, I'm gonna take my paintbrush and dip it into the slip. And remember, this is like the glue that holds these together. I'm gonna put it on the tile over those scratch marks. And I'm also going to put it onto the back of the dog. Then I'm going to attach the dog to my tile.
Then you're just going to push it down with your fingers, smooth it to make it look nicer, and you could even use some of your wood tools to smooth out the crease where the dog attaches to the tile. So then I'm going to take my person and do the same exact thing. Anything that you're adding to your tile, you're going to transfer the image, cut it out with your needle tool, and then scratch and attach it onto your tile. I'm scratching where the person is right now and on the person. Make sure it's the correct side. And then adding slip to it to attach it to the tile. One last thing is I want to add a coil to the outside of my frame. So I'm going to get a piece of my clay and roll it with the tips of my fingers to make a long coil. And then I'm going to scratch where my wavy line is on my tile around my frame. And again, scratch the coil and use slip to attach that coil around the frame. And I'm going to do this around the whole thing. So once I run out of coil, I'm just going to repeat that process. So after a day, the clay is almost leather hard and we're going to start applying the glaze. I'm using stroke and coat glaze, which can be applied to greenware, so unfired clay or clay that has been fired once. I chose to do red around the frame, and then I'm going to do black on the inside. And then I'm going to teach you how to use this graffito technique to scratch away the other parts for the subtractive method. Once the glaze is dry, we're going to now use this graffito method to make the other images onto our clay by scratching it away. So you can cut out any image that you want to transfer, press it on, and then go over it with your pencil by pressing down pretty hard. This will make an imprint in the clay, and then you can use some of your tools, your scratching tools, to scratch away right on the line. You can use your needle tool, and that will make the mark onto your clay. So when this is fired, that part is going to be white while everything else will be black. You can also freehand it. I'm just going to freehand that little spiky bubble and put dog in it. Any words you can just write on your tile, and then just make a little pile of all of that black clay, because this cannot be recycled. We're going to throw that away since it has glaze on it. And anything that's raised up, I'm just going around the outside just to make it pop a little bit more. Take your time and remember to add any action lines or words that you included onto your tile. Here's the finished product, and I'm going to let this dry for about 2 weeks before I put it in the kiln, just because the glaze re-wets the clay. And then this is how it looks after it was fired in the kiln.